Playing with Power MTG. Powerful cards, powerful formats. Be sure to check out Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks. TCG Player for cards at great prices while still supporting local game stores. And Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. We are excited to announce our very own custom Dragon Shield sleeves. You can find these on our store along with tons of other Playing with Power merch. We will be going to SCG Con Indianapolis later this month. We will be playing CEDH in the Command Zone and recording games while we are there. Stop by and say hello and let's all jam games together. We will also be going to the Marchesa 2022 tournament later this month as well. Marchesa is a 2-day Magic the Gathering tournament series featuring over $2,000 in prizes. It will have CEDH, Legacy, and Conquest tournaments. Check the links in the description below for more information. We hope to see you there. Check us out on Twitch every Wednesday evening for great games of CEDH with special guests every week. If you sub to Twitch, you'll get additional perks such as access to our Discord. Our Mox Pearl patron rewards are back. Every month we get together with our patrons and record a game to be on the channel. This is what this game is tonight. So let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Dante piloting the partner pair of Thrasios, Triton Hero, and Kodama of the East Tree. This is an advantage list that uses Thrasios to grind out value and finish with a combo using Kodama. Dante's opening hand contains a Command Tower, Karn, the Great Creator, Finale of Devastation, Eldritch Evolution, Mana Crypt, Force of Will, and an Ancient Tomb. Next, we have Cal piloting the partner pair of Malcolm, Kinnan Navigator, and Tana the Bloodsower. Also known as Teamer Pirates, this deck seeks to use Glinthorn Buccaneer in conjunction with Malcolm to win the game. Cal's opening hand contains a Worldly Tutor, Finale of Devastation, Arbor Elf, Scalding Tarn, Flusterstorm, Imperial Recruiter, and a Polluted Delta. Next, we have Chad piloting Sir Carah the Bold. This deck seeks to use its commander to gain card advantage with burn spells and win with a combo. Chad's opening hand contains 2 mountains, Deflecting Swat, Jeweled Lotus, Stormkiln Artist, Faithless Looting, and an Underworld Breach. Finally, we have Alex piloting Kinnan Bonded Prodigy. Also known as Predators, this is a stacks variant of Kinnan Mid-Power that seeks to slow down its opponents and use its commander to put giant creatures into play. Alex's opening hand contains a Phantasmal Image, 2 islands, Scroll Rack, Hullbreaker Horror, Mana Vault, and Tishana, Voice of Thunder. Without further ado, let's begin this turbulent, tubular, triumphant tantrum of toddlers. Dante was able to figure out whose line it is anyways, and gets to start us off. Dante draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts Mana Crypt. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Karn, the Great Creator. The table sees that it's gonna be one of those games, and Karn resolves. With nothing else, Dante passes. Cal draws and plays a Polluted Delta. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts Arbor Elf. He passes. Chad draws and plays a mountain. He casts Faithless Looting. He draws 2 and discards 2. He ships the turn. Alex draws and plays an island. He casts Mana Vault. Alex gives the turn to Dante. During his upkeep, Dante wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts an Arbor Elf of his own. He passes. Cal draws and plays a Scalding Tarn. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts his commander, Malcolm, Keen-Eyed Navigator. Cal ships the turn. Chad draws and plays a mountain. Being shut out by Karn, Chad passes. Alex draws and plays an island. He casts Phantasmal Image. It resolves and enters as a copy of Malcolm. He ends the turn. During his upkeep, Dante loses his Mana Crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts his commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. He follows it up with Heuristic Study. Sitting in a great position, Dante ends the turn. Cal draws and plays a Mana Confluence. He taps Mana Confluence to cast a Heuristic Study of his own. Heuristic triggers and Cal pays. Study resolves and Cal moves to combat. He attacks Karn with Malcolm. Karn takes the hit and Cal passes. Chad draws and plays a mountain. He casts Lava Dart, targeting Karn, paying for both Rhystic studies. Dart deals 1 to Karn, and Chad ends the turn. Alex draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Karn with Malcolm. Karn dies, and in his second main phase, Alex casts Scroll Rack. Both Rhystics trigger, and Alex pays for Cal's Rhystic, and Dante draws. He casts Mox Opal, paying for Cal's Rhystic, and Dante draws. He casts his commander, Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy. Both Rhystics trigger, and Alex doesn't pay for either. With nothing else, Alex gives the turn to Dante. During his upkeep, Dante loses his mana crypt roll and takes 3 damage. He draws and casts Biomancer's Familiar. He plays a Prismatic Vista. He passes. Cal draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Dante with Malcolm. Dante takes the hit and Malcolm triggers. He creates a treasure, and Cal ends the turn. Chad draws and plays a mountain. He casts Treasonous Ogre, not paying for either Rhystic. In response, Cal casts Pyroblast, targeting Dante's Rhystic study. Rhystic triggers, and Cal pays. In response, Dante activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing Training Grounds into his hand. He taps his Ancient Tomb and activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing Dispel into his hand. He cracks his Prismatic Vista, pays a life, and fetches up an island onto the battlefield. He casts Dispel, targeting Pyroblast. Rhystic triggers, and Cal draws. Pyroblast is countered, and with Ogre still on the stack, Cal taps his Mana Confluence to cast Mana Drain, targeting Ogre. Ogre is countered, and with nothing else, Chad ends his turn. During his draw step, Alex takes a damage from Manival. He moves to combat and attacks Dante with Malcolm. Dante takes the hit, and Malcolm triggers. He creates a treasure, and in his second main phase, Alex activates Scroll Rack. He exiles 4 cards from his hand, putting 4 cards from the top of his library into his hand, and rearranging the exiled cards on top of his library in any order. He plays a forest. He casts Mana Crypt. Both Rhystics trigger, and Alex doesn't pay for either. Alex ships the turn. During his upkeep, Dante wins his Mana Crypt roll. He draws and starts off his turn by casting Gilded Drake. Drake enters and targets Kinnan. In response, Alex activates Kinnan. He looks at the top 5 cards of his library and reveals Hullbreaker Horror, putting it onto the battlefield. Drake and Kinnan then exchange control, and Dante casts Finale of Devastation, where X is 3, not paying for Rhystic. He fetches up a Tireless Provisioner onto the battlefield. He plays a Windswept Heath. Provisioner triggers, and Dante creates a treasure. He cracks his Heath, pays a life, and fetches up a forest onto the battlefield. Provisioner triggers and creates a treasure. He casts Training Grounds. Rhystic triggers, and Cal draws. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Spellseeker. Rhystic triggers, and Cal draws. Spellseeker enters, and Dante fetches up a Crop Rotation into his hand. He casts Crop Rotation, sacrificing a forest as an additional cost. Rhystic triggers, and Cal draws. In response, Cal pays 2 life to cast Mental Misstep, targeting Crop Rotation. Rhystic triggers, and Dante draws. In response, Dante casts Force of Will, paying a life, exiling a blue card, targeting Mental Misstep. Rhystic triggers, and Dante pays. In response, Cal casts Flusterstorm with all copies targeting Crop Rotation. Rhystic triggers, and Dante draws. In response, Dante activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Soul Ring into his hand. Flusterstorm counters Crop Rotation, and Force of Will counters Mental Misstep. With the stack clear, Dante casts Mox Diamond, not paying for Rhystic. It enters, and he discards Urza's Saga. He casts Arcane Signet, not paying for Rhystic. He casts Soul Ring, paying for Rhystic. All finished up, Dante gives the turn to Cal. Cal draws, and in his first main phase, he adds 4 colorless through Mana Drain. He plays a Misty Rainforest, he cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Taiga onto the battlefield. He casts Finale of Devastation, where X equals 3, paying for Rhystic. In response, Dante activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing Force of Vigor into his hand. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Scalding Tarn into play tapped. Tireless Provisioner triggers, and he creates a treasure. Dante then activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing a Force of Negation into his hand. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing Mindbreak Trap into his hand. He activates Thrasios, scrying 1 and revealing Allosaurus Shepherd into his hand. Dante casts Force of Negation, exiling a blue card, targeting Finale of Devastation. In response, Cal casts Muddle the Mixture, targeting Force of Negation, not paying for Rhystic. In response, Dante casts Force of Vigor for its alternate cost, exiling a green card, targeting Cal's Rhystic Study and Scroll Rack. Rhystic triggers and Cal draws. Force destroys Cal's Rhystic and Alex's Scroll Rack. Muddle then counters Force of Negation and Finale resolves. Cal fetches up a Glinthorn Buccaneer onto the battlefield. He moves to combat and attacks Chad with Glinthorn and Dante with Malcolm. They both take the hit and Malcolm triggers. He creates 2 treasures, and in the end of combat step, Cal activates Glinthorn. He discards and draws a card. Glinthorn triggers, dealing 1 to each opponent. Malcolm triggers, creating 3 treasures. Cal then presents a loop of activating Glinthorn, dealing 1 to each opponent and creating 3 treasures. He does this over and over until the table is dead. What an exciting game. Let's do another, shall we? In this game, Cal is playing Prosper Tombbound, also known as Prosper Doomsday. This deck seeks to use its commander to gain card advantage and win with a Doomsday or Underworld Breach combo. Cal's opening hand contains a Soul Ring, Jessica's Will, Gemstone Mine, Diabolic Intent, Reign of Filth, Rakdos Signet, and a Wishclaw Talisman. Next, we have Chad, and he brings back Carah the Bold. His opening hand contains 2 mountains, a Chrome Mox Desperate Ritual, and his London Mulligans are a Vandal Blast, Mountain, and a Lava Dart. Next, we have Dante piloting the partner pair of Timna the Weaver and Crom, Ludovic's Opus. This is a mid-range deck that seeks to grind value with its commanders and win with Doomsday and other layered combos. Dante's opening hand contains a Gitaxian Probe, Gemstone Caverns, Dranith Magistrate, Swamp, Wheel of Fortune, Mana Confluence, and a Steam Vents. Finally, we have Alex piloting the partner pair of Kodama of the East Tree and Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. This deck seeks to gain value through its commanders and win with Bolas' Citadel or Thassa's Oracle. Alex's opening hand contains Ancient Tomb, Elves of Deep Shadow, Gemstone Caverns, Mystic Remora, Mental Misstep, Opposition Agent, and a Demonic Consultation. And Cal gets to start us off. But Dante and Alex have pregame actions. Dante puts a Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield with a luck counter, exiling a swamp. Alex also puts Gemstone into play with a luck counter, exiling Elves of Deep Shadow. Cal draws and plays a Gemstone Mine. He taps his mine, removes a counter, and casts Soul Ring. He casts Rakdos Signet. Cal passes. Chad draws and plays a Dwarven Ruins, tapped. He ends the turn. Dante draws and starts off his turn by paying 2 life to cast Gitaxian Probe, targeting Alex. He looks at Alex's hand and draws a card. He plays a Mana Confluence. He taps his Confluence to cast Dranith Magistrate. Both Cal and Chad considered rage quitting the game, and Magistrate resolves. With nothing else, Dante gives the turn to Alex. Alex draws and plays an Ancient Tomb. He casts Mystic Remora. He passes. Cal draws and plays an Emergent Zone. Cal ends his turn. Chad draws and plays a Mountain. He passes. Dante draws and plays a Steam Vents into play untapped, paying 2 life. He does nothing else and gives the turn to Alex. During his upkeep, Alex taps his Ancient Tomb to pay for Mystic Remora. He draws and passes. Cal draws, stares at Dranith and Remora on the board, and passes the turn. Chad draws and plays a Mountain. He ends the turn. At the end of Chad's turn, Dante casts Vampiric Tutor. Remora triggers and Alex draws. Dante fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. The turn moves to Dante. Dante draws and taps his Mana Confluence to cast Rhystic Study. Remora triggers and Alex draws. In response, Alex casts Force of Will, paying a life, exiling a blue card, targeting Rhystic Study. Rhystic is countered, and with nothing else, Dante passes the turn. During his upkeep, Alex taps his Ancient Tomb to pay for his Remora. He draws and passes. Cal draws, does nothing, and ends the turn. At the end of Cal's turn, Chad casts Lightning Bolt targeting Dranith Magistrate. Remora triggers and Alex draws. Bolt kills Magistrate, and the turn moves to Chad. Chad draws and sacrifices his Dwarven Ruins, adding 2 red. He casts Desperate Ritual. Remora triggers, and Alex draws. Ritual adds 3, and Chad casts his commander, Carah the Bold. Chad gives the turn to Dante. Dante draws and taps his Mana Confluence to cast Wheel of Fortune. Remora triggers, and Alex declines to draw. In response, Alex casts Dark Ritual, adding 3 black. He flashes in an opposition agent. Wheel resolves, each player discards their hand and draws 7. Dante plays an Underground Sea. With nothing else, Dante ends the turn. During his upkeep, Alex lets his Remora die. He draws and plays an Exotic Orchard. He casts Mox Diamond. It enters and he discards Flooded Strand. He casts Chrome Mox. Mox resolves and he imprints Praetor's Grasp. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Lurking Predators. In response, Dante casts Force of Negation, exiling a blue card, targeting Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators is countered and exiled. A little saddened, Alex passes the turn. Cal draws and plays a Luxury Suite. He casts his commander, Prosper, Tombbound. He moves to his end step and Prosper triggers, exiling Bolas' Citadel. The turn moves to Chad. Chad draws and starts off his turn by activating Carah, dealing a damage to Alex. Carah triggers, exiling Mana Geyser. He casts Mox Amber. He plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts Runaway Steamkin. He pays 2 life to cast Gutshot, targeting Dante. Steamkin triggers, getting a +1/+1 counter. Dante takes the damage, and Carah triggers, exiling Mizzix's Mastery. Chad casts Smash to Smithereens, targeting Cal's Soul Ring. Steamkin triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter. Soul Ring is then destroyed, and Cal takes 3 damage. Carah triggers, exiling a Snow-Covered Mountain. With nothing else, Chad ends his turn. Dante draws and casts an Esper Sentinel. He casts Counterbalance. He plays a Flooded Strand. He passes. Alex draws and plays an Undergrowth Stadium. He taps an Ancient Tomb to cast his commander, Kodama of the East Tree. He moves to combat and attacks Dante with Opposition Agent. Dante takes the hit, and Alex ends the turn. At the end of Alex's turn, Cal taps and removes a counter from Gemstone Mine to cast a Braid, killing Carah. Cal draws and starts off by casting Lion's Eye Diamond. Counterbalance and Esper Sentinel trigger. Cal pays for Sentinel, and Counterbalance reveals a Mana Vault. LED resolves, and Cal taps and removes the final counter from Gemstone Mine, sacrificing it. He cracks LED, discards his hand, and casts Bolas' Citadel from exile. Prosper triggers and creates a treasure. Citadel resolves, and Cal pays 3 life to cast Opposition Agent from the top of his library. It resolves, and he pays 3 life to cast Praetor's Grasp from the top of his library, targeting Dante. Cal searches Dante's library for a card and exile it face down. He pays 1 life to cast Reanimate from the top of his library, targeting Magda in Chad's graveyard. Counterbalance triggers, and Dante reveals a Cursed Totem. Reanimate resolves, putting Magda onto the battlefield under Cal's control, and he loses 2 life. Cal moves to his end step, and Prosper triggers, exiling an Imperial Seal. The turn moves to Chad. Chad draws and plays a Snow-Covered Mountain. He casts Chaos Warp, targeting Bolas' Citadel. Steamkin and Sentinel trigger. Chad pays for Sentinel, and Steamkin gets a +1/+1 counter. Chaos Warp resolves. Cal shuffles Citadel into his library and reveals a Polluted Delta, putting it into play. Chad moves to combat and attacks Dante with Runaway Steamkin. Dante takes the hit, and all finished up, Chad gives the turn to Dante. Dante draws and dashes in a Ragavan. He moves to combat and attacks Chad with Ragavan and Esper Sentinel. Chad takes the hit, and Ragavan triggers. Dante creates a treasure, and Chad exiles a Braid of Fire. In his second main phase, Dante taps his Mana Confluence to cast Braid of Fire. Dante moves to his end step, and Ragavan returns to his hand. The turn moves to Alex. Alex draws and casts his commander, Silas Wren, Seeker Adept. Counterbalance triggers, and Dante reveals Thassa's Oracle. Silas enters, and Kodama triggers. Alex puts a Gilded Drake into play and exchanges control with Cal's Opposition Agent. Alex moves to combat and attacks Dante with Kodama and Opposition Agent. Dante takes the hit, and Alex ends his turn. Cal draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Chad with Magda. Magda triggers and creates a treasure. Chad takes the hit, and Cal moves to his end step. Prosper triggers, exiling Talisman of Indulgence. The turn moves to Chad. Chad draws and plays a snow-covered mountain. He moves to combat and attacks Dante with Runaway Steamkin. Dante takes the hit, and in his second main phase, Chad activates Steamkin, removing 3 counters and adding 3 red. He casts his commander, Sir Carah. Steamkin triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter. With nothing else, Chad ends the turn. During Dante's upkeep, Braid of Fire gets an age counter and adds a red. He draws and casts his commander, Timna the Weaver. He passes. Alex draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Dante with Kodama, Silas, and Cal's opposition agent. Dante blocks Kodama with Timna and opposition agent with Esper Sentinel. Dante takes the hit and gains 2 life from Timna. Alex passes. Cal draws and casts Talisman of Indulgence. Prosper and Counterbalance trigger. Dante reveals a Verdant Catacombs and Cal creates a treasure through Prosper. Talisman resolves and Cal follows it up with Hornfell, Horn of Bounty. He moves to combat and attacks Dante with Magda and Alex with Prosper. Magda triggers and creates a treasure. They both take the hit and Cal moves to his end step. Prosper triggers, exiling Wheel of Misfortune. The turn moves to Chad. Chad draws and moves to combat. He attacks Dante with Runaway Steamkin and Sir Carah. Dante takes the hit and Sir Carah triggers. He exiles Burning Prophet, and in his second main phase, Chad plays a mountain. He casts Burning Prophet. Steamkin triggers and gets a +1/+1 counter. Chad passes the turn. During Dante's upkeep, Braid of Fire gets another age counter and adds 2 red. He draws and plays a Verdant Catacombs. He casts Ragavan. He casts Thassa's Oracle. It enters, and Dante looks at the top 4 cards of his library, leaving 1 on top and putting the rest on the bottom of his library. Dante ends his turn. Alex draws and moves straight to combat. He attacks Dante with opposition agent, Kodama, and Silas. Dante blocks Silas with Ragavan and Kodama with Thassa's Oracle. Silas and Dante both die. In his second main phase, Alex casts Survival of the Fittest. He gives the turn to Cal. Cal draws and starts off his turn by activating Harnfell, discarding Badlands and exiling a mountain, and Pyroblast. He plays the exiled mountain. Prosper triggers and creates a treasure. He casts Wheel of Misfortune. Prosper triggers, creating a treasure. In response, Alex activates Survival of the Fittest, discarding Wandering Archaic. He fetches up a Notion Thief into his hand. He casts Cabal Ritual with Threshold, adding 5 black. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Notion Thief. In response, Cal casts Pyroblast, targeting Notion Thief. Prosper triggers, creating a treasure. Thief is countered and Wheel resolves. Each player chooses a number and Cal loses 12 life. He and Alex both discard their hands and draw 7. He plays a City of Brass. He casts Mox Opal. He casts Sensi's Divining Top. He activates Top, draws a card, and puts Top on top. He activates Harnfell, discarding Prismatic Vista, exiling Sensi's Divining Top and Underworld Breach. Cal presents a loop of casting Top from exile, creating a treasure through Prosper, activating Top, drawing a card, and putting Top on top. He then discards to Harnfell, exiling the 2 cards on top of his library. With one of them being Sensi's Divining Top, he does this over and over until his entire deck is in exile and graveyard. Cal then casts all of the fast mana in his deck. Prosper triggers, creating a treasure each time. He casts Twin Flame, targeting Magda. He holds priority and flashes in Dual Caster Mage. It enters and creates a copy of Twin Flame, targeting Dual Caster. He creates a token copy with haste. It triggers and repeats. Cal does this 40 million times and moves to combat. He attacks Alex and Chad each with 20 million Dual Caster Mages, killing them, and Cal wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, that was a great pair of games. Congrats to Cal on his wins tonight. In Game 1, Dante's deck was doing everything it wanted and more. The interaction between his Thrasios activations only being 1 mana and creating a treasure every time a land came into play with Tireless Provisioner was extremely potent. But in the end, Cal was able to swoop in at the right time and pull the rug out from under Dante's feet and win the game. In Game 2, the game quickly became a grindfest with all the different stacks pieces on the board. Once Cal found some breathing room when the Drannith Magistrate was removed, he was able to find and resolve Bolas' Citadel using his commander. Although his all-in win attempt was thwarted, he was able to make a comeback just a few short turns later with an amazing combo that isn't really ever seen outside of this deck. The most valuable card in tonight's game goes to Harnfell, Horn of Bounty. Normally you see the front half of this card, Birgi, God of Storytelling, used for mana generation, but Cal was able to use the back half to great effect. In conjunction with his commander and Sensi's top, it allowed Cal to basically draw his entire library while generating the mana he needed from Prosper. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be the king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.